Welcome into Buccaneers Insider Live, presented by Miller Lite. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. And 1 week from today, we will finally be knowing some things about the draft. After months of prognosticating and evaluating and talking about it, we're finally on the final countdown here. So of course it's going to be a very draft-centered Insider Live that we have here. And any questions you have about that or anything else with the Buccaneers, you can put underneath our live video on Facebook in the comments section. We'll get to those in a few minutes. But for now, as we give people a chance to do that, Jason Licht spoke to the media this week, the man of the hour, the man everybody wants to know 1,000 things from, but the man who also will tell us very little about what they're going to do on purpose. So from what he was able to give you guys, were there any things that you felt like gave you some nuggets, some insight, something that you found interesting about what he said?
You got it right on the head there, that this is an annual thing. Probably most teams do it. Your general manager speaks before the draft, and it's an exercise in the media asking questions they hope he'll talk about, and him making sure he doesn't give away any strategy. But he does talk, I think, pretty candidly about some of his processes when it comes to drafting, and he'll tell you every draft pick, even in the first round, is a coin flip. There a lot of them are just not going to work out. But to try to increase your chances of success, there are a few things he does and tries not to do. And one of the big ones for Jason is never to push need too high, is the way he put it. So he's got his board set up by need and best player, and what he wants most of all is for those two to collide at the top. Whenever the players at the top of both lists, then that's the perfect outcome. And that's what he's going to try to do. So let's just take for an example, let's say the Buccaneers, he called them perceived needs because he's clearly drawing a line between what everybody says are needs and what they think are needs. But let's say a perceived need is edge rusher, and you have a tier of top 5 of them there, and by the time it gets to you, there are none of those left, and then there's a bit of a drop to the next tier, but you've got players at other positions that are higher on the board. Where you make your mistake and where you regret it even a year from now is when you just jump down, pick this guy at the position of need, of greater need than anybody else. Because if you think about it, at some point, with the way rosters turn over, you can make a pick at any position, and you're probably going to need it within a couple of years, right? So you got to think about right now, but you also have to have an eye to the future. And it got me to thinking about a question we took a couple weeks ago about, at 27, are there any positions where the Bucs could reasonably get the first player off the board at that position? And I went back and looked at all of Jason Licht's 8 drafts so far and who he took in the first round, and there have been a couple times where we have gotten the first guy at the position, and recently it's worked out quite well. 2018, Vita Vea was the first interior defensive lineman, got him at 12, Devin White the next year at 5, the first off-ball linebacker, but it doesn't always work out that way, and I think the best example there is Tristan Wirfs. There was 2 years ago, there were 4 players that everybody considered blue chip tackles, to the point where when there were 3 of them were gone and we were sitting at 14, we traded up. We gave up a 4th round pick just to move up 1 spot to make sure we got the last one. He was the last one left. He wasn't necessarily the last one on our board. And as we know, Tristan Wirfs worked out really, really well.
Yeah, and that can be the difference in how deep a draft is at a certain position where, there were 4 that teams thought were worth drafting no matter where it was in that first round. But there are going to be years and positions where you really only want the first guy, or maybe it's a huge difference between the first and the 4th, and so that's going to be interesting to see how that'll work this year. And in terms of looking at the first 3 rounds or so, first 4 rounds in particular, we know everybody likes to focus on Thursday, but I think that we can all definitely trust that process Jason Licht was talking about, because in his tenure here, they have done pretty well, especially those first few rounds.
Yeah, that was another bit of, I think, concrete bit of information that Jason gave us on Tuesday. And I think a lot of people feel this way about this draft. It's not a particularly top-heavy draft. There aren't a whole lot of guys must go in the top 5. There's a lot of disagreement about where some guys at like defensive end, edge rusher, in what order they're going to go in. And Jason said there may not be 30 guys that they have a first-round grade on this year. So, it's kind of scraping a little bit there at the end of the first round. But he says he does think this is a good deep draft in terms of mid-round picks, that when you're picking in the 2nd, the 3rd, and 4th round, there are going to be quality guys there, and those are very important picks. I mean, look at this. This is just the last, since 2017, players that the Bucs have picked in the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th round that became really core players for the Buccaneers and that Super Bowl team, and the one that went 13-4 last year. A couple of them have taken that success, unfortunately, for the Bucs and moved on, like Alex Kappa and Jordan Whitehead. But those guys right there were key players, key core guys. That's what the team was built around. I mean, I know we brought in Tom Brady, obviously,
right,
but that team, even with Tom Brady, probably doesn't win the Super Bowl if you aren't hitting on mid-round picks. And those picks are probably going to be especially important this year. And the Bucs pick at 60 and 91 in the third round. I don't remember the exact number of the fourth round pick, but yes, we're all going to be focused on the first round pick, but these middle round picks are going to be key.
Yeah, that is going to be huge, and I think that's also why some people have wondered if maybe the Bucs will try to trade down. So this is going to be a little plug for our road to the draft that we're going to shoot right after this, that will come out later, so that everybody can hear a little bit more about our theories on trading up, trading back, how likely that could be. And so definitely tune into in our final road to the draft that we'll be shooting after this. So I know that we in the past had talked about one of the potential positions you saw the Bucs looking at was defensive line, and it just turned out that Jason Licht got asked about that. So did that give you any information?
Yeah, I think the reason he was asked is because I'm not the only one who's been mock drafting defensive linemen like Devontae Wyatt, for example, to the Buccaneers. It's a common thing you'll see in mock drafts because it is a position where there could be some value left at the end of the first round, and the Buccaneers are potentially losing a couple players there. Jason Light's answer to the question was he brought up Vita Vea and Will Golston and Nacho, Raheem Nunez-Roches, and said they like some of the young guys too, like maybe he means Benning Patoye, Kobe Smith maybe, Patrick O'Connor, who just re-signed. And those are all good points. But you look at this, and Ndamukong Suh and Steve McClendon, if they don't return, that's about, 800, that's about 1,100 snaps. That's a lot of snaps. That's including the playoffs. That's a lot of snaps to replace. And if you don't think Benning Patoye or Patrick O'Connor is going to step up and take another 500 snaps, which, I don't think you can predict that confidently, right?
No.
Then you probably do need some more. Now, Jason's point was the draft isn't the only way to get them.
Right.
There's still more free agency. There's undrafted free agency. There's trades. He specifically mentioned how the trade deadline didn't happen until months and months from now, and he did trade for Steve McClendon a couple of years ago. So that's a very good point, and he's right. The Buccaneers are not going to be painted into a corner at the end of the first round or in the second round or whatever to take an interior defensive lineman. That being said, you can still see the logic why, if the need and the best player intersect, that would be a great pick for the Buccaneers.
Well, and we're going to get into the Facebook questions now, and you mentioned trades. So I think Crisell is how you say this name. Crisell said, do you think the Bucs will try to trade for Deebo Samuel?
I knew it.
I knew that question was going to come.
I was talking to people in the office as soon as that came out.
Yep.
I'm like, the first question, and it turned out to be true. The first question tomorrow is going to be, will the Bucs trade for Deebo Samuel? I can't help. I have to bring up that since the Super Bowl year and last year too, that things you would consider implausible.
Yeah.
You can't
never say
no.
never anymore.
When Leonard Fournette was cut, are the Bucs going to get Leonard Fournette? Well, I don't know about that. Bucs get Leonard Fournette.
Gronk, all the people.
Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
That said, so I won't dismiss it, right? And Deebo Samuel is a great player, and you could do a lot of different stuff in the offense with him. I'm sure Tom Brady would love to add Deebo Samuel. But you got to consider the Bucs cap space is nearly minimal at this point. They probably aren't going to sign anybody else until after the draft.
Right.
And it would be very difficult financially. And I know you can make it happen. There's always a way to work with the cap, but it's not easy, and you're hurting yourself down the road a little bit. And so if there's any position in which the Bucs would take on another like $18 to $20 million player, it's hard to see it being wide receiver when you're already paying Mike Evans and Chris Godwin a ton. So I don't think it's likely. I think there's a lot more likely landing spots if he is traded, but I guess never say never.
Never say never. All right, and then our next one, Daniel asked, do you think that we're going to have more offensive or defensive picks in the draft?
I think defensive. I think the only way that, we only have 6 picks, and 2 of them are in the 7th round, and I challenge anybody to predict what positions they're going to take with 2 of the last 10 picks of the draft. Right. So of the first 4, 1 in each 4 rounds, actually it could be pretty even because I could see us at some point taking an offensive guard or an offensive tackle, and I could also see us taking a running back or a tight end. So this is a bit of a cop-out answer, but I think it could be pretty even in those first 4. Like maybe a defensive lineman, maybe a cornerback, a tight end, and an offensive lineman. Yeah. I could see that happening. Yeah. And I'm not going to make any guesses as to what you're going to pick with pick number 260.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. And then we had Christina ask, any news on JPP?
No. And again, I think the Buccaneers have gone through most of what they're going to do in free agency. I think obviously the big question marks still out there are Rob Gronkowski and Ndamukong Suh. Especially Rob Gronkowski is the one we all think is the most likely to return.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no news on that, and I don't really think I'm expecting any.
Okay, and then our final one, we kind of talked about this, but Chad wanted to know, do you go after a tight end later in the draft, and then any word on Gronk yet? So I think part of this is also, if we were to draft a tight end, where do you think in the draft that might happen?
It depends on how important of a need the Buccaneers think that is, because we're going to, like you said, we're going to talk about trade scenarios in our next road to the draft here in a minute. But if you were to think that's like one of their top needs on their board, then I could see it like a trade down. You won't find a mock draft that has a tight end in the first round.
Right.
I went through 20 of them in 5 minutes yesterday and couldn't find a single tight end. But the consensus top tight end is Trey McBride of Colorado State, and one of the reasons why he is at the top is he's already a good pass catcher who's a big guy who they think can be a blocker. So he can be that kind of rare two-way tight end, like a Rob Gronkowski that you're trying to find, and that guy could get on the field right away in two tight end sets even if Rob Gronkowski is here.
Right.
And he could be a very important player if Rob Gronkowski is not here. So if the Buccaneers were to maybe trade back, it could be a second-round target. But there's enough depth in the middle rounds at that position, like a Cade Otton or a Jelani Walker, that the Buccaneers could get a guy in a third or a fourth round. So if I were guessing, I would think they go somewhere else with their first pick, but a tight end could be possible at the second and third round.
All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Buccaneers Insider Live presented by Miller Lite. Thanks for all of those questions, and we hope you guys are going to be tuning in to our live show we're going to be doing next Thursday right before the draft. We're going to be doing it from the draft party that's here at Raymond James Stadium, and we're also going to be streaming it live, so you guys will be able to check it out no matter where you are. So we'll see you then.